Okay.
Do you have something you want to talk about?
No, but I don't have to go all the way back and talk about where I was born and everything like that.
No, but although I need to know that. I mean, I want to. Is that your phone?
Yeah. Sarah. Hello? Yes, dear. No, I haven't heard from Ruby since yesterday morning. Okay, sorry. All right, bye-bye. Okay. I hope you wasn't recording that.
I'm recording everything.
I was born on June 14th of 1941. That's my birthday. 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And I was born at what they called the General Hospital back then. It was Louisville General. And earliest thing I can remember is sitting in my high chair, and there was a little hole in the wall, and I would drop my spoon down in the hole in the wall. I think that kind of got my mother aggravated. But don't tell me how many spoons are down there. We spent an awful lot of time down at my mother's house, my mother's parents' house, because they had a big slew of kids there too, and my mother was the first one in the family to get married. Of course, my dad was too, the first one in his family. But, and I guess that's the reason why I'm the oldest grandchild. But I'm real happy that I am the oldest, because I got to know all of my grandparents. I knew every one of them. And I feel like that's a great blessing. I remember my mother's mother, her name was Olga Dow, but of course to me, I called her Mom, because, and my mother's dad was Pop, my Mom and Pop, you know, as opposed to my mother, who was Mommy and Daddy. You know, I mean, there wasn't any confusion in my mind. Had a big awning that come out with these poles about so big that held up the awnings, you know, and that was Black's Dry Goods store. And some of my uncles, who were just kids themselves really, would go over and buy balloons and blow them up for me and Susie. And then they'd come around and pop them. They enjoyed teasing us that way. Heck, I was driving a truck before I went to school.
Before you went to the first grade?
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah. I wasn't supposed to be now. But my Uncle Turk come over and parked his truck in front of the house and went in to visit his sister, my mother, you know, and my dad. And so me and Sue, we thought, well, let's get in and pretend we're driving. So I got in and I stood up on the seat, and I told her, now you run the pedals. And so she was down on the floor doing the pedals, and I was going to do the steering and all this other stuff, you know. And back in those days, it had a starter button on it, and everybody left it parked in gear because that way it wouldn't roll away. Well, every time I would push the starter button, the car would jump like that, see? And so what the heck, we were blocking the half down the street before they ever come out and find out their car was gone. He come out, well, I mean, it's a truck, it was a pickup truck, Ford pickup truck, green. And yeah, we were way on down the street. They didn't spank us or anything.
They were probably happy you weren't hurt, you know?
I guess so, yeah. But I'm sure they told us not to do that anymore.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I was a mischievous kid, and I got to tell you, I'm glad I didn't have any that bad. At least your mom didn't tell me about it. If I got it, I don't know. And my Uncle Turk came home from the war on a furlough, and we really liked him. He was one of our favorites. And then he was getting ready to leave and go back to the camp, wherever he was camped at. And we decided, hey, let's go back to camp with him. I'm sure it was my idea. It couldn't have been Sue. She was too young to think of that. But so we decided to go with him.
but we didn't want to walk behind him close enough that he would see us or he would make us go home. So we kind of kept our distance, and we followed him, and next thing you know, we weren't following him anymore. I didn't know where he went. And we were just walking down the street, me and my little sister, hand in hand, you know. And it turns out we were up at 19th and Duncan Street by that time. And it was in the middle of the afternoon, and some of the neighbor people, you know how back in those days everybody sit out on the porch and talk to their neighbors and everything. And people saw us walking down the street, and they started asking us questions like, hey, what's your name? Where do you live? And all that kind of stuff. And I couldn't tell them where we lived, and actually we were lost. But we didn't know we were lost. We were just walking along, and we told them we were following my uncle who was going back to camp, you know. And but we lost him. We didn't know where he was. And so they didn't know us either, and they didn't know where we came from. So they called the police. And the police came down, put us in a police car, and we really couldn't tell them where we were. We told them what our name was, but that didn't mean anything. And they asked us where we live, and I said, well, we're not at home. We're down at Mom and Pop's house. And that didn't help anything either. And they said, well, where do they live? And well, I said, well, they live next door to that big store where they sell balloons. That's the only thing I could tell them. And so they got us in the car, and we cruised around the neighborhood until finally we saw a Black's Dry Goods store, and I said, that's it, that's the place. And so they took us over there and gave us back to our parents. But it's just interesting. The only thing I knew to tell them was that we lived next to that big store where they sell balloons.
That's pretty good.
I tell you what, I was a corker. I'm glad I didn't belong to me. My mother used to take me to the bingo with her, and that was something I really liked to do. And one of the main things I remember, besides just running around and playing on the banisters and the steps and everything else, they had a piano there, and there was an old blind man who used to sell shoestrings in between the games. He'd be up and down the aisle selling shoestrings and pencils and stuff like that. And occasionally he'd go over to that piano, and boy, he could knock out a tune. And really, it was very inspiring. I loved to hear him play. Old Blind Jimmy, they called him. I don't know what his name was other than that. But it was inspiring in that I always told myself, if that blind man can play a piano, surely I can play piano. I've got my sight, you know, I can see what I'm doing. Every time I get a little discouraged, I think of old Blind Jimmy and how he was able to play so well, and it helps me to persevere and give it another try. One day, I must have been in the principal's office or somewhere, and I noticed a window that wouldn't lock. And it was partway open, you know, just a little bit open. You could raise it up, and it was unable. It probably been painted to where they couldn't close it, you know. I didn't know what the reason was, but anyway, one day, me and all my playmates, which was my sister Sue, my cousin Jeannie, who lived down at the corner, and probably Deanna. I know Deanna knew about it because I talked to her recently. She lives down in Florida now, and her and probably Janet, all me and about 4 or 5 of my kids I played with, we went down to the school, which was only down on the next block, and we went down to the school, and I showed them this window where we could get in. So we got in, and I all climbed through the window, and we were having a great time. And there was desks, and there was blackboards and thumbtacks and just all kinds of stuff, and all the kids were little. Heck, I was only in first grade. I was 6, and I was a year and a half older than Sue, and Sue was a half a year older than Jeannie, so or a year older, something like that. And Janet was even younger than that. I mean, I was down there with some babies, you know, but I was the ringleader. and I got them in there. We just had the biggest old time just writing on blackboards, and I put a thumbtack on the teacher's chair so when she sit down on it, she would. We stayed there and played in that room, and finally it got dark and we had to put the lights on, and that's what gave us away. We didn't, being little children, we didn't think of it, but we had the lights on, and Father Lehman must have seen the lights on from his rectory and walked over there and saw what was going on. And I don't know how he did it because I don't know that part of the story, but when the door finally opened, he had our parents with him. So he had went and got the parents and had them come down there to get the kids. And they opened the door, and when the door opened, everybody scattered. We all trying to find some place to hide, but there wasn't any place to hide in that little classroom. So anyway, they took us all out, and I don't know about Jeannie, but the rest of us, they didn't spank us. They just told us don't do that again. They were nice parents. I had good parents. I got my share of spankings, but I didn't get it for stuff like that. Disobedience or something maybe, but not being adventurous. I enjoyed receiving the sacraments. Making my first communion was a big deal. And it always has been a big deal in my life, as I remember back. And I can almost remember everything that happened that day. I made my first communion in the morning at Mass, and then in the afternoon, about 2 o'clock, we had confirmation, same day. And, I understood all, like I said, religion came easy to me. I didn't tell you about the time in the first grade when I wasn't used to going to Mass every day, but when we started, they had Mass every day. And I would go in there, and a lot of the boys would be playing around and carrying on. I'm talking first grade. And they would be making spitballs and shooting them at each other. And I thought, man, that looks pretty fun. So I tried it. And my very first spitball, Sister Mary Jane, the principal, caught me. And she took me and another boy and took us over to her office. And she had polio when she was younger, and so she walked with a limp. And she took us over to her office and had us bend over the desk and took his hickory stick and whooped our butt with it. And then she told us that she didn't want to see us misbehaving like that in church again. And actually, you would think that I probably would have a bad memory of that, but actually, I love Sister Mary Jane, and I appreciate what she did for me that day. She gave me a lot more respect for what was going on at church. And that was in the first grade, and it's not the first time I ever had a spanking due to church. My parents had to take me out and spank me a few times from Sunday Mass, I was just a mischievous kid. Like I said, I'm glad I didn't have to raise me. But yeah, I fondly remember Sister Mary Jane, and I pray for her, and I think of her and thank her a lot. She really helped me. That was a much needed straightening out right then and there, nipped it right in the bud. And my sister was following right behind me, and so when I failed the second grade, having made my first communion and everything, I was in the second grade over again, and my sister was in there too. And so I got to be in the second grade room with my sister. And when it come time for first communion, they were wondering what to do with us guys who had flunked out and didn't make it to third grade. And so me and my buddy Chummy Jansen got to be altar boys for the second grade's first communion when we were a year older but we were still in that class. And so we got to dress up in the altar boy things, and we got to carry candles with the, the glass thing with a candle down inside of it, and walk along beside the priest and the crucifix and all that stuff. And it was really, really neat. I enjoyed that.
How long were you an altar boy for?
Oh,
I
I wasn't really an altar boy.
Oh, okay.
I just got to dress up like an altar boy and wear their clothes and do these things, Heck, I couldn't be an altar boy back then. I didn't know my Latin. you had to be able to get down there and say them Latin prayers and do your gesturing at the right time and everything you're supposed to do back in the old pre-Vatican II days, and I didn't know how to do all that. And my cousin Jeannie lived right on the corner, pretty much on the corner. There was a grocery store there, but her house was next to it. And they lived there before we did. They had their place first. And that would be my Aunt Annie and Uncle Leroy. And they were the first ones in the neighborhood that had a television set. And we used to go down there on Friday night, and my grandpa and Old Bibb, and Grandma would come down there, and they'd make up popcorn by the dishpan full, and watch wrestling on Friday night. And my grandpa would get into it. He used to be a wrestler anyway, Noble Bibb. You didn't know he was a wrestler?
No.
Well, I think he did, but mainly his daddy was a wrestler. And anyway, he was more baseball type, but he did get into the wrestling. I mean, he thought everything they did was as real as can be. He did not know it was all fake. Yeah. And of course, none of the rest of us did either. We were really into that wrestling. They had all these wrestlers. I don't guess y'all know them anymore. What their names were? Gorgeous George. He had long curly hair, and the Mighty Moto. Of course, it's right after World War II, and so he was the big villain. He's a Japanese-looking Oriental guy with this bald head and just big, heavy guy, Mighty Moto. And Wild Red Berry. He would get out, and before he would start, he would go around and kind of throw out these red berries of some sort. I don't know what kind they were, but he'd throw them out to the audience. And this was just so hokey, but we were also naive, too. We didn't have any clue. and it was just really, really fun back in those days watching that television. Little bitty screen, but we'd all get down there and watch it, and it was a lot of fun.
Was there, y'all cheered and yelled at TV
Oh,
and stuff?
yeah. Really carried on. Grandpa, too. I mean, he led the way. But I think I was more impressed with the quantity of the popcorn than anything else. Man, they really had a lot of popcorn back in them days.
Maybe.
He forgot something that he always told me. He said the best part of school was recess.
Oh, that's what I was going to try to get him to say. When I asked him what his favorite part was, I thought for sure you would say recess, and you didn't say that.
Oh, I didn't know you were talking about the school day. I thought you meant the school experience. But yeah, anytime you get a break from school, it would be great. And recess and lunch was the best times. I enjoyed playing out on the playground. We would sometimes play marbles or catchers or anything where you could run around and be free, and not have to sit in your desk. Because I never walked anywhere, I always ran. Walking was just too slow. Well, me and Susie was down there one day. Well, mom was probably down there too. I don't know where my dad was. Not important. But we were playing, and we got under one of the beds in the house. And I don't know if we were hiding or something, but I think we fell asleep. And before you know it, next thing I knew, people were looking all around for us. And I got up and then went out from under the bed, and my grandpa was sitting on the front step, and I went out and sat down by him. And apparently people had been looking for us for some time and calling and everything, but we had been asleep. And I think Sue just didn't want to get up. Maybe she was scared since everybody was looking for us and calling. I don't know what her problem was, why she didn't come out from under the bed, but I went out and sat down by my grandpa, and I didn't tell where she was either. But people were coming around and looking for her, and they were all outside mainly. They figured we wandered off again. And they were starting to give my grandpa grief because he wasn't up looking for us like everybody else was. But he was looking in his mind, he was trying to figure out this thing in his mind. And after a while, he called me Billy. Him and my other grandpa both called me Billy from time to time. But he got up off the step and he says, in a nice loud voice, he said, "Come on, Billy, let's go get ice cream." And then from inside the house, you could hear Susie saying, "Me too." so that's the way she got found. But we got our ice cream too. He took us on over and got us ice cream. Before the flood wall was built, you can see the K&I Bridge in the background. But after the flood wall was built, of course, you couldn't see anything. You couldn't see down to the river or anything. And there's houseboats that's down on the river. And people, parked their boats down there and was living there. They don't want to do that anymore. Just bring it up to the shore. There wasn't any kind of facilities. Just people, that's their house and they live there.
Wow.
My daddy pointed out one of them and he said, "That's where Dirty Neck Johnson lives." And I don't know if there's a guy there whose name really was Dirty Neck Johnson or if he was trying to get me to wash my neck. I don't know which one it was, but it's interesting. He never did say.
How do you remember the name Dirty Neck Johnson?
How can you forget it? I didn't have a bicycle, but my friend who lived next door had a bicycle. His daddy gave him a bicycle for his birthday or something. It was new to him. He learned how to ride it. And he would tote me around, and I'd sit on the back fender and he'd hold on and he would ride me around. But then he got to wanting me to ride it. And the back fender was low enough that I could get both feet on the ground. And I felt very secure there. But the seat was pretty darn high because I couldn't really touch the ground very good with my feet. And so I was concerned about it. Anyway, I sit on the back fender and learned how to ride the bicycle from the back fender. No kidding. But after I got used to riding the bicycle, then I tried it up on the seat and found out it wasn't too bad either, and that was okay. But it was interesting. That's the way I learned how to ride a bicycle. My first day of school was a disaster. I didn't want to be there in the first place. And that old nun that I had that was teaching, I didn't have sense enough to do what everybody else did. She said, "Put your right foot out or left foot out," whichever one it was. She wanted us to put our left or right foot out in the aisle, whichever it was she said, and I didn't know my left from my right. And so I put the wrong one out there, and she come over and scolded me, and right away I knew I didn't like school at all. And I never much changed my opinion the whole time I was in school. You'd think I'd have sense enough to just do what everybody else did, but I wasn't used to following anybody else. I was the oldest kid in my family, and I'd always been kind of an independent spirited person, not wishing to take instruction that much, but just find out things on my own. I've always loved to explore. You know, when I was a sophomore in high school, I hadn't signed up for any extracurricular activities. And the brother that was my homeroom teacher, I guess, he took account of who all was involved in what and found us, several of us weren't involved in anything. And he made us go up and report to Brother Xavier for a glee club. And why he did that, I don't know, but you know, that was one of the greatest things that happened to me. When I look back at my high school years, that's one bright spot that I can look at and feel really happy about. In my sophomore and junior years, I sang with the glee club. We had the biggest glee club in St. X history, 82 people in that thing. Normally, I think they have about somewhere between 15 and 25, you know. But we had 82 people in it, and it was fantastic. And I really enjoyed it. My senior year, I had to drop out because my folks had bought a farm, and I had to live over in Indiana and couldn't get to the glee club activities, you know. Just couldn't get there anymore. But looking back, I really liked that. Suited me to a T. I got my letter, high school letter that you get for a glee club. Well, you know, there's a time and a place for everything. And if you don't get it at the right time, you just basically miss it. It's not that you can't make up for it. You can make up for it somewhat. But it's too late to go back and get everything you didn't do. You know, I could have taken public speaking or something and been a lot more outgoing amongst people. But I didn't do it.
Would that have been too much to handle?
Yes.
Are you sure I can't videotape you, Mom?
When he said he'd be more outgoing and speak more to people, my gosh, he talks constantly all the time to anybody he meets along the way.
Yeah. Public speaking is an art that I could have learned in high school. They taught it. But they didn't teach me that because I wasn't smart enough to know that I should go for it. I just didn't know. But nonetheless, I am who I am.
We're all very
I'm pretty.
fine.
I tell you what, I'm really happy with my life, though. In spite of obvious mistakes that I made, basically, I've had a happy life.
That's good.
And look at my wife. I'm so tickled to death to have her for my wife. You wouldn't believe it. This is my childhood sweetheart. I've known her since she was 14. You know, I mean, of course, I asked her to marry me when she was 14 too, but she was a lot smarter than me, and she didn't commit herself to anything. Anyway, I have had a wonderful life, and when I pray, I always thank God for my life. In spite of all the mistakes and everything else I've made, it seems like some of the really, really basic stuff I got right. I never had a problem with my religion. It always came easy to me. I always understood it, and I grew in my faith the way people normally do, I guess. But I never was rebellious toward it, and I always feel like that I continually grew. And of course, that's as much, probably more God's work than my work. All you need is a little, God needs a little cooperation, and He can lead you. But other things, I made a lot of other mistakes in life, but I did okay with God, fairly good, and I got me a good wife early on and stayed with her. And we had our family that we had planned on, and God was good enough to give me a good job that allowed her to stay home and raise the children. I enjoyed my time in the military, and when I got out of high school, I had a good job waiting for me at the FBI. I'm telling you, looking back, all the important stuff was good, and I guess that's why I had such a happy life. I've really been happy in my life.